Okay, so good morning everyone. Let me start the presentation. Uh, it is- okay, can you see the screen?
Yes, sir. It's visible.
Okay. So in the last class, I had pointed out that the budget surplus is equal to taxes minus G, government spending, minus transfer payments. Okay, so when G increases, let's ignore transfer payment. It's not related to productive activities. Okay, so when G is increased, then other things remaining constant, the budget surplus should decrease. We should have a budget deficit, right? But an increase in G means that Y is going to rise. So then the question is, if tax is lump sum taxes, there will be no change in T. But if tax is an income tax, that is T is equal to capital T is equal to T into Y, then an increase in G means Y is also going to go up, and that means your taxes are also going to go up. So then the question is that is it possible that the increase in tax revenue offsets the increase in G so that the budget surplus or deficit remains same? Okay, so I'm just writing down the argument over here. What we are saying is that the budget surplus is T minus G plus transfer payment. Okay, let us suppose at a particular point of time it is equal to 1000.
Sir, are you writing something?
Can't you see it?
Yes, sir. Your write-ups are not visible, sir.
I'm sharing my screen, so I'll stop presenting. Could you see my PowerPoint?
No, sir.
Acha. Okay. Can you see this PPT?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Can
Now
you
it's
see the paint?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So the budget surplus is equal to T minus T is the income of the government minus the expenditure. The expenditure is on two heads: government spending on productive activity, what we call G, and government spending on pensions, etc., not related to productive activities, transfer payments. Let us suppose at a point of time budget surplus is equal to 1000. Now, suppose the government increases G by, let us say, 200. So what will be the budget surplus? The budget surplus will fall by 200.
Yes, sir.
yes, sir.
So the new budget surplus is T is the same as before. You have G, government spending has gone up by 200, and transfer payments. So this is equal to 800. Okay. Now the increase in G means,
So that will be plus TP plus 1.
sorry, I can't see. I couldn't hear you. That will be,
Plus transfer payment. G plus 200 plus 200.
yeah, plus TP. Sorry, thank you for that. So the increase in G means that Y will also increase via the multiplier effect, right? Now if you have an income tax, then an increase in Y implies T will also rise, right? So the budget surplus is your initial T plus T into dy sorry, I'm always getting it equal to. It will be something like this. And if T dy is equal to dg, then what is the budget surplus? Budget surplus is same as before,
Yes, sir. Both are the same.
right? Logically this follows.
Yes, sir.
Okay. So now the question that I had asked at the end of the class was, how much will what is dy by dg, right? What is dt? And 3, what is dps by dg? I mean, as I have framed the argument, if dy dg is equal to dt, then your dbs should be equal to 0, right? So let us see whether this is true or not. Okay, have you copied this down?
Yes, sir.
So the budget surplus is equal to T. Remember, this is a constant, so we can ignore it basically. Achha. Now the first question, what is the increase in Y? Okay. Now what is your income? It is C y minus ty. Okay. Now find out what is dy by dg from this equation. Work it out on your own. Have any of you been able to solve it?
স্যার স্যার আপনি মিউট হয়ে গেছেন।
Can you hear me now?
আপনি মিউট হয়ে গেছেন স্যার, আনমিউট করুন।
এখন
আপনার কথা শুনতে পাচ্ছি না।
না না ঠিক আছে, এখন শুনতে পাচ্ছ?
হ্যাঁ স্যার পাচ্ছি।
আচ্ছা, না তখন আমি ইচ্ছে করে খুলেছিলাম, আমার মিউটেড কখনো ছিলাম না।
আচ্ছা আচ্ছা আচ্ছা।
হ্যাঁ, সো ক্যান ইউ হ্যাভ ইউ সলভ দিস প্রবলেম? হোয়াট ইজ ডিওয়াই বাই ডিজি? Vishakha? Have you done it?
So it will be 1 by 1 minus
1 by?
sorry sir, that was for lump sum tax. For income tax it will be 1 by 1 minus c brackets 1 minus t.
Okay. So in case you haven't done it, dy is equal to c prime into this is dy, this is also dy, so this is c prime 1 minus t di dy, I is 0, or this is 1 minus c prime 1 minus t dy is equal to dg. Okay. Acha. So we have got dy is equal to actually I shouldn't have used the prime over here. Okay, so okay, everyone has got this. I'm erasing it.
Yes, sir.
So the dps by dg but remember that this is equal to 0, or we can write, for simplicity it's better if we write it in this way, dt minus dg. Okay, let's use this form. Achha. We know that dg is equal to this, and what is dt? This is equal to t into dy. So dg is equal to t into right. So we can write this in this way, t so we can take dg common, so this is t, this will be minus 1 plus c 1 minus t, right? So this will be, if I take minus 1 common, 1 minus t minus c 1 minus t. So this is minus 1 minus c into 1 minus t okay. Okay, so DBS is equal to the change in the budget surplus is equal to this expression. Now DG is positive. What is 1 minus C? Positive or negative? 1 minus T?
Sir, also positive.
Okay, this C into 1 minus T, positive, and it will be
Positive, sir.
less than 1.
Yes, sir.
So what we have is, if we take this, all of it is positive. dg is also positive. So this term is negative, right, because of the negative sign. So what happens is, if your government spending goes up, your taxes will also increase, right? So the budget surplus will not increase by 200. At the same time, the taxes will also not increase by exactly 200. When I told you that, it would have been very nice if government spending, let me copy it down. It would have been nice if government spending had leads to an increase in taxes also, but well, that's not the way that the economic system operates. Okay, so we see that if G rises by 200, then T will also rise. But the rise in T is less than the rise in G. So dt is less than 200. Okay. So budget surplus will fall when G is increased. Is it clear?
স্টেটমেন্টটা বুঝলাম না স্যার, ম্যাথমেটিক্যাল পার্টটা বুঝেছি।
হ্যাঁ, তো ম্যাথমেটিক্যাল পার্টটার মানেটা কি? What does the mathematical part means? What is DBS? What is D?
The change in the budget surplus.
So we have shown this to be equal to this expression.
Yes, yes.
And this is negative.
Yeah, yes, sir.
Okay, so what does negative sign means? Your budget surplus is
Inverse
coming down.
relationship.
Not inverse relation. Don't try to complicate things unnecessarily. What it means is, the budget surplus is not increasing, it is going to decrease.
Yes, sir.
Okay, so if your G rises by 200, it is true that T will also rise, as Y increases through the multiplier effect. But the rise in T is less than the rise in G. Okay, so that means if your G rises by 200, then T will rise by less than 200, let us say by 150. Okay, so what is the budget surplus now? Sorry, the budget surplus was 1000. I forgot. So what is the budget surplus now? Your G has increased by 200, so the surplus should fall to 800.
800.
T rises by 150.
So it's 950 now.
Yeah, so the budget surplus is 950. It has fallen, but the fall is less than dg. Part of it you can compensate through the rise in tax revenue. Part of the initial fall in budget surplus can be recovered through a rise in tax revenue. Okay, but you cannot recover the entire part. That is important. So the budget surplus is going to rise. Sorry, the budget surplus is going to fall. Okay, so if you come over here, you can see that if generally the budget surplus is a positively sloped line if you look at y. If there is inflation, y is going to go up. If there is a boom period, y is going to go up, and your taxes are going to rise. Tax revenue is going to rise. So that means budget surplus will be positive. On the other hand, if you have recession, y is falling. As a result, your tax revenue is going to fall. So during recession, you have budget deficits. During boom periods, you have budget surpluses. Okay, is it clear?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
So let me write this clearly. During boom, dt and during recession, what happens? How do we correct this? We have a budget deficit. Now this is negative. Okay.
Sir, can you show the graph once again? I am not getting it. Yes, sir.
Okay. Now we come to a very interesting case, type of tax and government multiplier. First, let us go back to the Ricardo equivalence theorem. Okay, so let us suppose that we have a budgetary surplus. Right. Let me just change one word. Okay, let's keep this. Let us go back to the Ricardo equivalence theorem. What does it say? Does anyone remember?
Sir, like in during budget deficit,
Government
if
expenditure.
during budget deficit,
If the government funds the government
does not mean that
expenditure using a
we
bond,
Okay, one
then
of
basically we will have to pay that bonds in the
অদ্রিজিৎ
future.
না আর অন্যজন যে বলছে ওকে বলতে দাও।
I was saying that during budget deficit, if the government thinks that if the government tries to reduce the taxes, that does not mean there will be increase in income, because the present reduction of taxation would be a future burden. It would be a burden for the future generation to come.
Okay, very good. So basically the Ricardo equivalence theorem looks at the budget surplus or deficit over time. Okay, it brings into consideration a temporal dimension. So let us suppose that we have a zero budget deficit. Budget surplus is equal to 0. So that means G is equal to T. This is called a balanced budget. Okay. Now let us say G is increased keeping taxes constant. So this means that you are going to have a budget deficit. Okay, and this is funded through borrowings. Okay. In fact, sorry, it's I've made a mistake. You keep your G constant, but you cut taxes. Okay, so the supply side economists say, or both the demand side and supply side economists will say, that the tax cut will stimulate the economy. Your disposable income has increased, therefore you are going to spend more on consumption goods. So aggregate demand will rise and this will lead to increased production. Okay. Now the problem is that because you are borrowing, this means that the current tax cut, the tax cut in the present period, will lead to a rise in taxes in the future. This is the crux of the Ricardo equivalence theorem. So basically what is happening in this case is, if you have a budget deficit, it doesn't mean that your taxes are going to go up. Or on the other hand, if you say that your G is going up, people know, according to this theorem, that an increase in budget deficit means you are going to increase taxes in the future. So therefore, people are not going to spend their income, the extra income, the increase in disposable income that they get will not be spent, but will actually be saved. So the classicals therefore argued that we should not increase the government spend, we should not change the budget surplus or deficit, but always try to balance the budget. Since we should balance the budget. Okay. That is the core of the classical. That is the classical argument in favor of balancing the budget. Now, what happens if we try to balance the budget? During inflationary periods, what will happen to the budget surplus? Suppose the government does nothing.
Repeat the question.
Achha. Suppose there is inflation or boom in the economy. What is happening to Y output? During boom periods, what happens to output?
Increases. It increases.
It is going to increase. What will happen to the budget surplus? Currently the budget is balanced. If your Y increases, will G rise?
No, sir.
Will taxes rise?
Yes.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Taxes will rise.
Why? I'm not.
Rise.
অদিজিৎ একটু অন্যদেরও বলতে দাও। আচ্ছা, why will taxes rise? I have not changed the tax rate.
But why to বাড়ছে? তো সেই হিসেবে
হ্যাঁ, exactly. আচ্ছা, so in that case, what will happen to budget deficit?
ডিক্রিজ।
হ্যাঁ, তোমার ব্যালেন্স বাজেট ছিল, এখন সারপ্লাস হয়ে যাবে। আচ্ছা, so what should you do to balance the budget? তোমার সারপ্লাস হয়েছে, ট্যাক্সটা বেড়ে গেছে, তার ফলে সারপ্লাস হয়েছে। হাউ উইল ইউ ব্যালেন্স দ্য বাজেট?
Sir, increase G.
Exactly. Now during inflation, if you increase G, what will happen to aggregate demand?
It will rise.
Achha, but if you want to control inflation, what should you do? Increase demand or reduce demand?
reduce demand.
Reduce demand.
You should reduce demand. So what you are doing is, instead of controlling inflation, you are actually increasing demand.
Yes, sir.
So what will happen to inflation in that case? It is going to intensify.
Rise.
Yeah. Okay, so let me just write this down. We start with a balanced budget. Let us suppose we have inflation. So Y will rise and T is equal to will also rise. So a budget surplus will emerge. To balance the budget, we should increase G. Okay, so this will stimulate demand, so AD rises and inflationary pressure in the economy intensifies. So instead of controlling inflation, the government is actually increasing the inflationary pressure. Is this clear?
Yes, sir.
Acha. What will happen in case of deflation? Deflation or depression? What will happen to Y? Don't worry, I'll give you time to write it down. Yeah. Y will fall. So what will happen to T?
It will fall.
Right? Dy is negative. So taxes will fall. Now what do you have?
Budget deficit.
You have a budget deficit. Balancing the budget means
To reduce G.
this will reduce aggregate demand,
Yes, sir.
and so the depression will actually deepen.
Yes, sir.
Okay. So the classical policy of balancing the budget will simply increase the oscillation, the cycles will deepen, or rather it will widen, it will be larger. So you can think of it in this way.
So, so will the graph be like that with tax and without tax graph?
No, see, what we have over here is Y. Sorry, no, this is not Y. This is Y. I'll come to your question later. I didn't understand it. So this is the boom period and this is the recession. Another boom has started over here. So what is now going to happen is you are going to have cycles like this. So this is the case of if you balance the budget. and this is the normal trend. Do you understand this?
Yes, sir.
During a boom period, during the boom period, when you are coming over here, this point, during the boom period when you are coming over here, the government should reduce government spending. But what the government is doing is actually it's increasing government spending. So that is why you move from the brown to the green. During recession, government spending should be reduced. Government spending should be increased. But what you are doing is you are reducing government spending so that recession becomes stronger. So in other words, the Keynesians argued that the classical policy that you should always balance the budget is going to lead to a lot of problem. Okay, see over here. So basically the argument was that you should not try to balance the budget, but depending on what the economic situation is, you can have a budget surplus or budget deficit. If you try to balance the budget, this is actually going to have a harmful effect on the economy. Okay. Have you copied the earlier slide? This one.
No, sir.
Okay. Let's see. You have copied this, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Tell me, let me know when you have finished copying this slide.
Yes, sir.
Okay, so someone was asking a question. What was it? Can you please repeat it?
No, sir. I was just saying that this graph looks similar to that investment graph in which there is with tax and without tax.
You mean this one? This one?
Sir, much before when we were calculating dy by di.
dy by di. I don't know. Anyway. Okay. So that this is the next slide. So basically what is the Keynesian argument was that balancing the budget is going to affect economic stability. The economy, as you can see, is becoming more unstable. Okay. Inflation, when it occurs, you're actually going to increase inflation. When there's depression, you're actually going to reduce demand further and increase depression. So economic policy is basically stability. It should stabilize the economy, but balancing the budget means it's actually going to make the economy more unstable. Okay. Have you finished the slide, or do you require more time?
Yes, sir.
Will I shift?
No, sir.
Okay. এবার হয়েছে? আড়াইটা? আচ্ছা আচ্ছা, MD has asked me to convey a message that she has sent a link for the class starting from 2:30. So you'll have a 2-hour gap in between my class and her class. Okay. Okay. Now we come to the Keynesian theory. Okay, so Keynes argued that during depression we could come out of depression by increasing government spending. The problem is one of your demand is too low. One way of increasing demand is by increasing government spending. This is going to have a spillover to the household sphere. Consumption spending will also go up via the multiplier effect. As a result of this, the government multiplier will have an effect which is above 1. Okay, so basically what the Keynesians were saying that when you're increasing spending by 100 rupees, the increase in demand is more than 100. As you know, it is equal to 100 into 1 divided by 1 minus marginal propensity to consume. Okay. So, during the Depression, Keynesians argued that the focus should be on increasing government spending. Forget about balancing the budget. Try to stimulate, try to increase the level of aggregate demand. But is it always possible to just go on increasing spending without worrying about the budget deficit? I mean, if you had looked into, I mean, you don't have to write this down, okay? You can just write. You don't need this this part of this quotation, the intended part. You can copy down the first 5 lines and the last 3 lines. Okay, copy it down and let me ask you a question. So I hope you have finished it. So during Depression, the focus was on increasing aggregate demand through higher levels of government spending. Further, the multiplier effect meant that if G rises by say 200, the increase in demand is more. let us say 450. Actually it is equal to, as you know, dg 1 minus c. Okay. Now rising, if g rises continuously, keeping t constant, this implies that budget deficit will also rise. So how to finance this deficit? So the problem became one of ensuring fiscal sustainability. Okay, this was the fear which nagged in the minds of the Keynesian economist. They knew that fine, I can increase G in the short run, but in the long run, at some point of time, I'll have to finance the economy. Otherwise, the economy is going to collapse. I mean, if you think of the Indian economy, in 2019, the budget deficit was very high. Okay. So, in 2020, when recession started, what should have been the policy?
Increasing G, sir.
But this would have
Further increase the budget deficit.
the budget deficit. So already you have a high budget deficit. This is going to become fiscally unsustainable. It's going to become even higher.
Sir,
So-
what if the government uses the budget on something to get some good returns? For example, building a new port or something like that, which would benefit the country in the long run, like an investment.
Yeah, that is fine. We are not saying that you should not increase government spending. But remember that you have to
The debts.
finance the deficit at some point. So how will you finance the deficit? By increasing taxes, reducing G in the long run. So what you're simply doing, I mean, now you're coming back to the classical example, the classical model. The classical argument was, if you have a budget deficit now, if you increase G now, it means you have to reduce G in the future. So today if you increase G, you have a budget deficit. After 5 years, when you have to pay back the bonds, you either have to reduce G or you have to increase taxes. What will be the effect in that case? That is going to have a negative impact on the economy. So it's basically a temporal process. When do you want the increase to take place? The classical said, in that case, forget about it. Let private investment do everything. Keep G equal to T. Okay, but let's come back to the Indian economy. So what happened is, in 2019, you have a high deficit and it increased throughout the year. In 2020, when the COVID lockdown started, the government should have increased G. and that is actually, if you remember, Abhijit Banerjee
Raghuram Rajan, sir.
and Raghuram Rajan advocated for greater government spending
Cash transfer.
to stimulate the economy. Yeah, through cash transfer, etc. It is called direct benefit transfer. On one hand, it's going to protect the people, the poor people who lack savings. On the other hand, aggregate demand is going to rise and you are going to come out of the economy, of the depression. Why the government did not do? There were two reasons. One is they didn't care a fig about the common people. The second is, in fiscal terms, you already start with a very high fiscal deficit. And increasing G means the situation might have become unsustainable. Okay. So as you can see, this fear, what I've said over here, the Keynesian argument, the Keynesian did say that okay, you should increase G, but they also realized that this is something that cannot be continued forever. You have to stop at some point. In the short run, fine, you can continue, but in the long run, there is a payback time. So Havelmo propounded in 1945 the concept of a balanced budget multiplier.
So during a recession, like when in 2019 we had budget deficit, and in 2020 during recession, if we had increased government spending, it would have stimulated the aggregate demand. So this will lead to rise in production, and so government can get back the taxes.
But what did I show you just now? Your taxes will rise, but will it be equal to G?
No, sir.
Okay.
What did I show over here?
Yes, yes.
If your G rises by 200, taxes will rise by only 150. So your surplus is going to fall. Okay. So Havelmo propounded the concept of what is called a balanced budget multiplier. So the budget surplus is defined as T minus G. What you're saying that an increase in G will lead to budget deficit. Simultaneously, Havelmo said you should increase T by the same amount. DG is equal to DT. That means if you increase government spending by 200, you should also increase taxes by 200. In that case, the budget surplus will remain unchanged. We have a balanced budget multiplier. Okay. Now, what is the balanced budget multiplier? So, in case of a balanced budget multiplier, we have to shift from, we have to use a slightly different type of model. Y is equal to C like this. You have lump sum taxes. Okay, so dy is equal to C. This is dy into dt plus dg. So you have C into dt, this is C into dg plus dg. So what is dy by dg equal to? What is dy by dg equal to? Chopin?
Sir, it's coming 1.
Yes, sir.
It's coming 1.
So this is 1 minus c by 1 minus c equal to 1. So that means okay. Now if you come to the logic of the curve, see what happens is, let me show this over here. Why is the BBM equal to 1? See what happens is, let us look at the increase in G, and this is the increase in T. Okay. Okay, let us consider the first period. If there is an increase in G, how much does Y change or aggregate demand change? Just in this period. It increases by dg. So let us say that I'm the government, I place an order for 1000 rupees. So what is the increase in aggregate demand? 1000. On the other hand, let us say that your taxes falls by is increased by a certain amount, let us say 1000. Will demand also fall by 1000? See, your disposable income will fall by dt, which is equal to dg. But how much will consumption fall or demand fall? What is the consumption equation equal to? Capital C is equal to small c into y minus t.
Yes, sir.
So if t falls, how much will income fall? It will fall by c into dt, right? Okay. Now in the second period, how much you have the multiplier effect? So this has gone up by dg. So let us say I placed an order for 1000 rupees with Adrijit. Okay, so in the first period his income has gone up by 1000 rupees. In the second period he is going to spend this income. How much of this 1000 rupees is he going to spend? The entire amount.
1000 into small.
No.
1000 into small. MPC into 1000.
So AD will rise by C into DG. Now in the first period, your income had fallen by C into DG. In the second period, what will happen? How much will your income fall? Aggregate demand will fall by C into this amount, which is equal to C square dg. Okay. In the third period, how much will aggregate demand rise? And this process is going to continue.
Yes, sir.
What is the net increase in aggregate demand and why? If you look at this, how much has income fallen? C into DG. How much has income increased? C into DG. So these two are cancelling out.
Sir.
Yes.
Sir, I just had a small doubt, sir. On the first line, under increase, you have written YD will fall by DT is equal to DG. মানে ট্যাক্সটা ফান্ডেড হচ্ছে, সরি ট্যাক্সটা ফান্ড করতে গভর্নমেন্ট এক্সপেন্ডিচারকে, এটা বুঝলাম। এরপর এই যে লিখেছেন সি উইল ফল বাই সি ইনটু ডিটি, ওটা বুঝলাম না, ওটা কেন স্যার? মানে
তোমার if taxes goes up, if taxes are increased, your disposable income is going to fall. What will happen to consumption in that case?
কনজাম্পশনে ফল করবে, ডিসপোজেবল ইনকাম ফল করবে।
তো সেটাই লিখেছি।
আর এই সিডিটা স্যার সি ইনটু ডিটি, ওইটা
কতটা, how much will consumption fall? Suppose your income changes by 100 rupees. Is your consumption changing by 100? No, it will change by C into dy.
আচ্ছা, হ্যাঁ স্যার।
আচ্ছা,
ও আচ্ছা।
So in the first period you have, what is the change? It is dg minus C into dg. This is the first line. In the second period it is C dg
minus C into CDG, মানে C square DG.
C square dg. In the third period
C square dg minus T cube dg.
Right, and this is going to go on.
So তার মানে ক্যান্সেল আউট হয়ে যাবে ভেতরের টার্মগুলো।
Sorry, এক minute. Exactly. So what is going to happen is this will simply become, all these are going to cancel out and you are simply going to end up with dg. So now
Yes,
you
sir.
have dy is equal to dg. So what is the value of the multiplier? It is equal to 1,
1.
which is exactly what we showed.
Yes sir.
Yes.
Okay, so I hope you have got the logic. So this is the logic of the balanced budget multiplier. Okay. Now, is the balanced budget multiplier always equal to 0? Sorry, always equal to 1? That is a question that is often asked. And the answer is that in the simple model that we have shown, in the simple Keynesian model, it is always equal to 1, given certain assumptions. If we extend the model, make it, for instance, if we introduce exports and imports, if we consider an open economy, in that case, the economy will not be, the balanced budget multiplier will not be equal to 1. When you go to the ISLM model or if you go to the complete Keynesian model, then also the balanced budget multiplier is not equal to 1. Okay, so these are the cases when the BBM is not equal to . So you can introduce export minus import, the balance of trade. In that case, you can see that you will see that the multiplier is not equal to 1. The other cases, you can go to the ISLM or complete Keynesian model. Then also the model, you have the financial sector and so on coming in, labor market coming in. In that case also the BBM will not be equal to 1. But here you are basically changing the model. Okay. Even if you consider the simple Keynesian model in a closed economy, the BBM may not be unity. We can think of 3 cases. See, the assumption is that you have taxes, the beneficiaries and the basic assumption is that all agents are homogeneous. Okay. But if your marginal propensity to consume is different, okay, so you have MPC 1 for consumers and MPC 2 for investors. In that case, the BBM may not be equal to 1. The two effects will not cancel out. See, the tax is being imposed on investors. Okay. And consumers are benefiting from increased government spending. So if the consumers spend more, their NPC is higher, so the rise in Y will be more in that case. Okay, you can just work it out in the earlier case. Yeah, in this case what you can do is you can put C1 over here. Think of C equal to, let us say, the marginal propensity to consume is, let us say, 0.5 in this case. Here let us say the marginal propensity to consume is 0.7. Okay, so will this and this cancel out?
No, sir.
In fact, you are going to have a BBM which is greater than 1.
Yes, sir.
It depends on which MPC is greater.
Right.
Okay. The second is that you can have transfer payments. So if you have a transfer payment that is not taxed, okay, demand is going to go up. But because these people are not being taxed, you are going to have a differential effect. The third, in fact, the third and fourth cases in the case of welfare measures. In fact, if you look at transfer payment, you have this Martin Bailey discussed two cases when the BBM can be equal to 0. So suppose the government directs its additional expenditure for welfare purposes. Okay, so in that case, what is going to happen is that when you have a tax, when you are imposing a tax, your private expenditure is going to come down. So it's something like this. If I take, suppose you are a person, okay, you are a household. I impose a tax on you. I impose a tax of 100 rupees on you. How much will your expenditure go down?
So seeing the
Or
tax
let us say,
amount.
no, sorry, let me reframe the question. Okay, what does your consumption depend upon? Your consumption function is a function of Y minus
Income.
tax plus transfer payment.
Yes, sir.
Acha. Now suppose the government increases spending, but it doesn't increase G, it increases transfer payments by 100 rupees. And then it imposes a tax on all people of 100 rupees. How much will your disposable income change?
It stays the same.
It remains
Remains
same.
same.
What is the effect on consumption? Will consumption change?
No, sir.
And finally, what will happen to income or aggregate demand? It's same. So what is the balanced
sir.
budget multiplier in this case?
So 0.
It is 0. So even in a simple Keynesian model, closed economy, the BBM can be 0. Now consider a second case. You have a public distribution system, the rationing system, which is funded by lump sum taxes. So the government procures food grains at market prices and sells them at subsidized rates to households. And the resultant deficit is financed by lump sum taxes. So in this case also there will be no change in consumption expenditure. Let me copy paste this and I'll show this to you. So the first argument, case 1 was consumption is a function of disposable income. Now this is equal to y minus t plus transfer payment. Suppose G increases expenditure on transfer payment by 100, funds this through taxes. So YT is equal to so this is equal to the original YD. So consumption is same and BBM is equal to Y, equal to 0. dy doesn't change. Okay. Now we come to the second case, the PDS. What is happening is you are purchasing $10 kg of food grains at a price of, let us say, rupees 5 per kg. So what is your consumption? Your consumption is 50 rupees.
Yes.
Achha. Now the government introduces a subsidy of rupees 2 per kg. So what is the transfer payment in that case? $10 into 20.
20. Sir.
This is the subsidy. And this is the increase in G. Achha. So what happens to expenditure? Achha. Okay, so this is one thing that you do. Now this subsidy is funded by taxes. So what is the increase in tax equal to?
20 rupees.
The budget is balanced.
Yes, sir.
So in that case, is the household benefiting?
No, sir. মানে এখানে 20 টাকা পাচ্ছি, আবার উল্টো দিক থেকে ট্যাক্সের 20 টাকা দিয়ে দিচ্ছি।
Exactly.
একই হলো।
So if we think about it, what happens is your YD is, initially it was 50, your taxes now become 20, but you also have a transfer payment of 20. So your YD remains the same as before. So what is the value of the BBM? In this case also,
Zero.
it is 0. So even in the case of a complete Kenshin, of a simple Kenshin model, you can see that the balanced budget multiplier may become 0. Okay. So therefore, the Kenshins have now have somewhat changed the style. They are realizing that if you go for a balanced budget multiplier, well, I mean, it's not very sure what is going to happen. It's not going to have the desired effect. What they are saying that you should balance the budget over the business cycle. Now, what exactly does it mean? It means that suppose you have inflation. The economy has moved to the upswing cycle. Y is increasing. And as a result of this, your consumption demand is going up. What should be the policy to control inflation?
To increase taxes so as to reduce the demand.
Yeah, you can increase taxes. If you increase taxes, your deficit, you are going to have a budget surplus, right? Now let us come to the deflationary. So once you start introducing tax hikes, the inflation is going to come down, and you are going to enter into a recession. How can you come out of recession?
Set to increase the government expenditure.
If you increase government expenditure, what is going to happen to the surplus or to the deficit?
Sir, the
deficit is going to happen.
Sir, aggregate demand will rise.
Now, budget deficit, what will happen to the deficit?
Oh, deficit. ওটা তো বেড়ে যাবে. That will increase, sir.
Now, think of the two periods, boom period. You have a budget, surplus or deficit?
Boom হচ্ছে surplus.
You have a surplus. Let us say your surplus is 1,000 rupees. When you come to the recession part, you have to think about two things. One is you have to come out of the recession. Second is you have to fund the budget deficit, right?
Yes, sir.
Now what happens? You already have a budget surplus of 1,000. You can simply spend this. If you spend it,
sir,
aggregate demand will rise.
So you are telling about the boom period?
No.
The budget surplus.
See, let us consider a period like this. Let us say that a budget surplus is 0. Okay. The economy enters into boom. Y is rising, ED is increasing, and this is generating inflationary pressure. Okay. So the policy should be increase T. So a budget surplus will emerge. Let us say this budget surplus is 1000 rupees. Achha. Now the tax hikes will lead to recession. So what should be policy? The policy should be to increase G. In that case, you are going to have a budget deficit. And increased demand. Now the Keynesians had been, I told you that the problem is that if you just go on increasing G, you will have to fund it. But
Yes,
now
sir.
the advantage is, what is the source of the fund?
The budget surplus
The surplus generated in the,
during the next boom period.
no, it has already been generated.
Oh, we are saving it. Acha, acha. Yeah, that can be done. Yes, sir.
You have already generated a boom period. So if you consider any one period, let us say boom, if you consider boom, you have a surplus. If you consider recession, you have a deficit. But if you consider both the periods, what do you have?
So then it is zero.
The surplus and
the-
deficit
Are equal.
balances. You have a
Yes, sir.
balanced budget. Got this now?
Yes, sir. Now understood.
So this is what I have said in the earlier slide. The problem is that you'll always have to change the policy. It's not a stable policy. You'll have to change it. So during booms, you'll have to go for tax hikes. During recession, you'll have to go for tax cuts. See, theoretically, it's very easy. The problem is, if you remember the political business cycle, the government also has to keep in mind, the government is not neutral. It's formed by a political party who wants to be re-elected. So what will happen in that case? If the boom occurs during inflation, just before election, will it go for a tax hike?
No, sir.
So theoretically, this is called a counter-cyclical policy. It is called counter-cyclical or compensatory policy.
So that one day you said that in India there are things like state election varies from state to state. So every month there can be election in every state. So labor taxes can be increased like that before the election.
Yeah, but just think of the UP election.
Yes. So
It was, you had elections in 4 states, but the increases in LPG petrol, that was stopped till for the entire India. So theoretically it's possible, you can change it. But whether you see, the second thing is you have to understand how long the recession is going to continue, when is it going to come. You have to take into account political considerations. So let us for the moment ignore the political considerations. There are 2 issues over here. Suppose the boom period is very small. Demand rises but by a very low amount. So you will have a budget surplus of 1000. But the recession is very deep. In that case, what will happen? You require government spending to increase by, let us say, 5000. So can you balance the budget over the business cycle?
এটা আরেকবার বলবেন লাস্ট কথা
Suppose you have a small boom, your budget surplus is 1000. The recession is very deep and continues for 10-15 years.
আচ্ছা
So how much do you have to increase government spending by? Will 1000 do, or will you require
নো স্যার
more amount?
জি বললেন তো অনেকটা
আরো বেশি লাগবে. You'll require more funds. G will have to increase by 5000, 6000, whatever. So you can't really balance the budget accurately. Theoretically, it's very easy. If you have a smooth cycle, you know it's going to occur after every 10 years, and the boom is equal to recession, it's fine. But theoretically, it doesn't happen that way. Okay. So I'll stop at this point and give you a break